Welcome to Mind, Soul, Reality, Me, So, Are, where we explore the intersections of human consciousness, scientific discovery, and the deeper truths of existence. Our name honors miser, the ancient Phoenician concept of righteousness and balance. For centuries, we have been conditioned to see the world through a divided lens. We are told that we must choose between the cold, hard facts of the laboratory and the warm, ancient rituals of the altar. We often view these forces as opposing tides, crashing against one another in a battle for truth. But perhaps the shoreline where they meet is not a place of conflict, but of discovery. Today we step into that space to explore a spirituality that needs no name and a science that embraces the mystery. There is a quiet longing that exists in the human heart, a feeling that often arises long before we have the language of belief. It is the hush before a sunrise, the heavy stillness of grief, or the sudden spark of wonder in a child's eyes. These moments are not religious in the institutional sense, yet they feel undeniably sacred. They signal a universal yearning for connection, a desire to belong to something greater than the self. This longing dwells in the liminal space between what we know and what we cannot explain. It is here that many modern seekers find their home, away from the rigid structures of doctrine, but deeply attuned to the mysteries of existence. It is a feeling that does not require a temple or a text to be valid. It simply requires us to be present, acknowledging that life is far more profound than our daily routines suggest. We must be wary of the God of the gaps, a theological trap that attributes the divine solely to unexplained mysteries while leaving the known world to physics. This approach imperils spiritual life, for as the light of scientific knowledge expands, the shadows where such a God resides inevitably shrink. Rather than retreating into ignorance, a robust spirituality finds its ground in the light of understanding, marveling at the breathtaking complexity and elegance of what we have already discovered. We cannot fully embrace a synthesis of science and spirituality without acknowledging the deep scars of their history. For centuries, the relationship between empirical inquiry and religious dogma was not a conversation, but a battle for the monopoly on truth. This friction was often less about the nature of reality and more about the preservation of authority. When the lens of science began to dismantle ancient assumptions, it was perceived not as a gift of clarity, but as a threat to the divine order, creating a rift that would take centuries to heal. The trial of Galileo Galilei remains the defining archetype of this struggle. When Galileo turned his telescope toward the heavens and confirmed that the earth revolved around the sun, he challenged the geocentric view that humanity sat at the unmoving center of the universe. To the church of his time, this sun-centered model was not merely a scientific hypothesis. It was a theological crisis that seemed to diminish humanity's significance in God's eyes. The resulting condemnation of Galileo highlighted a tragic contradiction. A religious institution fearful that the truth of nature would undermine the truth of Scripture. If Galileo exposed the rift, Albert Einstein offered the bridge. He famously observed that science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind, suggesting a symbiotic relationship rather than a duel. For Einstein, the scientist's devotion to truth was itself a deeply spiritual act, driven by what he called a cosmic religious feeling, a profound reverence for the rational harmony of the universe. In his view, science purifies religion from the dross of fear and superstition, while this sense of awe provides the emotional fuel that drives the scientist to explore the unknown. He moved the conversation from a battle over dogma to a shared appreciation for the mystery of order. Looking back, we can see that these historical contradictions often arose from a misunderstanding of domain. The conflict creates a false binary, forcing a choice between the mechanics of the physical world and the meaning of the human experience. However, as Galileo himself suggested, the intention of the Holy Spirit is to teach us how one goes to heaven, not how heaven goes. By understanding this distinction, we dissolve the contradiction. We learn that acknowledging the vast impersonal laws of physics does not negate the personal, intimate need for purpose. Rather, it sets the stage for a faith that is brave enough to face the universe as it truly is. If Galileo displaced humanity from the center of space, Charles Darwin displaced us from the center of time. When On the Origin of Species proposed that life was not sculpted in a single divine week, but forged through eons of natural selection, it struck a nerve deeper than any telescope could reach. To many believers, the idea that humanity shared a common ancestor with primates felt like a spiritual demotion, a loss of the divine spark that separated us from the beasts. Yet this friction has birthed a profound theological pivot. Rather than seeing God as a magician who pulls rabbits from hats, many modern thinkers now view the divine as the author of a process so fertile that matter itself is endowed with the creativity to become life. Evolution in this light is not the enemy of the sacred, but the epic history of its unfolding. History further dismantles the wall between these worlds through the lives of those who wore both the habit and the lab coat. Gregor Mendel, an Augustinian friar, is the father of modern genetics. Yet his breakthrough did not happen in a secular university, but in the quiet garden of a monastery. For Mendel, the rigorous counting of pea plants was not a distraction from his spiritual duties, but an extension of them, a patient, meditative uncovering of the mathematical laws governing life. His work demonstrates that the discipline of the monk and the rigor of the scientist are born of the same impulse, a deep, attentive willingness to observe the world as it is, trusting that the details of creation reveal the mind of the Creator. Perhaps the most striking example of this convergence is found in Georges Lemaître, a Belgian Catholic priest, who also happened to be a brilliant theoretical physicist. It was Lemaître, not a secular atheist, who first proposed what we now call the Big Bang theory. When he theorized that the universe began from a single primeval atom, he was initially met with skepticism by scientists who preferred an eternal, static universe. Lemaître navigated the delicate balance of his vocations with grace, famously advising Pope Pius XII against using the Big Bang as direct proof of Genesis. He understood that while science can describe the physical expansion of the cosmos, the theological concept of creation speaks to a philosophical origin, proving, once again, that one can hold the chalice and the calculator without spilling the contents of either. If Lemaître found room for God at the beginning of time, Stephen Hawking sought to remove the need for a beginning altogether. In his earlier work, he famously suggested that a complete theory of the universe would allow us to know the mind of God, a phrase that offered hope for a final reconciliation. However, his later inquiries led him to a more radical conclusion. that the laws of physics are sufficient to explain the origin of existence without divine intervention. His no-boundary proposal envisioned a universe that is finite but has no edge in time, much like the surface of a sphere has no beginning or end, effectively removing the singularity where a creator might stand. For Hawking, the sacred was not a being, but the logical necessity of the laws themselves. The universe did not need a hand to light the blue touch paper, for gravity and quantum mechanics ensured it could create itself from nothing. While Hawking sought to explain the universe through mathematics alone, other thinkers have looked at the subatomic world and found a mirror of ancient wisdom. In his seminal work, The Tao of Physics, physicist Fritjof Capra argued that the hard, solid reality of Newton dissolves at the quantum level into a vibrating web of relationships. A picture strikingly similar to the Eastern mystics' view of the world as a dynamic, interconnected flux. He drew parallels between the energetic dance of subatomic particles and the cosmic dance of Shiva, suggesting that modern physics was finally catching up to the intuitions of Buddhism, Hinduism, and Taoism. This perspective proposes that the observer and the observed are not separate, challenging the cold objectivity of classical science and inviting a worldview where consciousness and matter are intimately woven together. The deeper we probe into the fundamental constants of nature, the more we confront the startling precision of the anthropic principle. It appears that the universe is fine-tuned for life with an accuracy that defies statistical probability. If the force of gravity were slightly stronger, stars would burn out too quickly for life to evolve. If it were slightly weaker, galaxies would never have formed at all. This Goldilocks scenario, where the conditions are not too hot, not too cold, but just right, forces a profound question. Is this calibration a lucky accident in a multiverse of dead worlds, or does it signal that the universe was, in some fundamental way, pregnant with the possibility of consciousness from the start? For the seeker, this principle suggests that we are not accidental tourists in a hostile cosmos, but native to the fabric of reality itself. For many modern scientists who hold to a faith tradition, the solution lies not in denial, but in a disciplined distinction known as methodological naturalism. In the laboratory, they play by strict rules. They seek only natural causes for natural phenomena, leaving no variable for divine intervention in their equations. However, this refusal to invoke miracles in their data is not a denial of the divine in their lives. It is simply a recognition of the limits of the scientific tool. They partition their experience, understanding that while science is the supreme authority on how the universe functions, the mechanics of the atom or the neuron, it remains silent on the question of why. By treating science and faith as different languages for describing different aspects of reality, they avoid conflict, allowing rigorous skepticism and deep belief to occupy the same mind without contradiction. Closer to home, neuroscience is building a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern data. Studies show that meditation reshapes the physical structure of the brain, validating the transformative power of inner stillness. We are learning that the peace promised by mystics is not just a metaphor, but a biological reality we can cultivate. Beyond these discoveries lies a deeper riddle. Why does the universe follow laws so elegant that human minds can grasp them? Why is there a mathematical rhythm to the way a star collapses or a flower blooms? The intelligibility of reality suggests that the universe is not random chaos, but a system that offers patterns and revelations designed for dialogue. Whether one sees divine intention or emergent order, the universe behaves as if it wants to be known. It leaves breadcrumbs in the form of fossils, photons, and frequencies, inviting us to follow the trail. In this way, science becomes a sacred inquiry, not because it proves a deity, but because it constantly evokes the divine sensation of wonder. Carl Sagan once wrote, "Science is not only compatible with spirituality, it is a profound source of spirituality." When viewed through this lens, the scientific method becomes more than a tool. It becomes a form of reverence. To study the cosmos is to kneel before the vastness, not to conquer it, but to commune with it. Spirituality offers a compass rather than a map, intuitive, personal, and evolving. It does not demand we follow a fixed route, but asks us to check our bearing. What do I feel, know, and serve? It values the journey over the destination, allowing us to navigate the landscapes of meaning with freedom and integrity. Science, too, is a compass one grounded in curiosity, evidence, and a willingness to be wrong. It teaches us to replace superstition with inquiry, and hubris with the thrill of discovery. Together, the compasses of spirituality and science guide us not to a single, static truth, but to deeper and better questions. We end where we began, not with a final answer, but with a deepened sense of the question. The journey from the quiet longing in our hearts to the fine-tuned constants of the galaxies reveals that reality is too vast to be captured by any single lens. Science has dismantled the small, static universe of our ancestors, but it has replaced it with a cosmos of infinite majesty. Spirituality has begun to shed the weight of dogmatic fear, evolving into a courageous engagement with the unknown. Ultimately, the perceived war between fact and faith is a relic of the past. The future belongs to the synthesis. We are invited to live as integrated beings, holding the rigor of reason in one hand and the humility of awe in the other, walking forward into the mystery with our eyes and our hearts wide open. If you are ready to continue this journey beyond the binary, please take a moment to like this video and share it with a fellow seeker. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Mind Soul Reality and hit the notification bell. Together, let's keep exploring the shoreline where knowledge meets wonder. Thank you for watching.